They buried him once. Then they buried him again. But even in death, his bones would not rest. And now, no one can say for sure where his body is or what he became. You were never supposed to hear this story. It was meant to vanish, like the man himself. But here you are, on the edge of something darker than myth and more disturbing than any history book dares to admit. Anthony Wayne, Mad Anthony Wayne, was a Revolutionary War hero, a man forged in violence, loyalty, and blood. But what they never told you is what happened after he died. How his corpse was dug up, boiled, burned, and scattered. And still, he didn't stay buried. This is not just a story about a man. This is about power, control, and the rituals used to possess a legacy. You want to know the truth? Then step carefully. Because once you begin this descent, you don't climb back out unchanged. Mad Anthony Wayne was no ordinary soldier. His name was forged in the fire of the American Revolution, storming fortresses, defying orders, killing with a calculated frenzy that earned him the nickname Mad. But madness, my friend, is not what they think it is. Not always chaos. Sometimes, it's vision that cuts through the veil. Wayne saw things others didn't. He acted like a man who already knew how history would remember him. Like he had something guiding him, something behind the curtain. His victories weren't just military, they were psychological. He knew how to break an enemy's spirit, how to use fear like a weapon. His men followed him like zealots, and maybe that's what scared the elites the most, his influence. You see, in the end, the people who write history don't want warriors, they want puppets. Mad Anthony was neither. He was too powerful to control, even in death. And that's where this story twists, because the mystery isn't in how he lived. It's in what they did to him after he was gone, and why. Wayne died on a rainy day in December 1796, at a remote fort in Pennsylvania. There were no grand processions, no marble tombs, just a simple grave, buried in the ground at Erie. But it didn't end there. 13 years later, his son came, for his body wanted it moved closer to family land. What happened next reads like an occult ritual. A local physician dug him up, found the corpse nearly intact, his skin leathered, his body preserved by time and climate. That should have been enough. But it wasn't. Instead of simply transporting the remains, they boiled his flesh off the bones. Let that sink in. They dismembered him, cooked his body, collected the bones, and carted them hundreds of miles in a box. But here's the thing, not all the bones made it. Some were lost, or deliberately left behind. And from that moment forward, silence began echoes. Hauntings. Mad Anthony, they said, was riding again. A phantom general, never at rest. Now ask yourself, why would anyone desecrate a body like that? Unless it wasn't just about moving the bones. Unless it was about erasing something sacred or dangerous. Every empire has its rituals of power. Rome had augury. Egypt had embalming. But in the shadows, behind the official ceremonies, there were other rites, darker ones. Acts designed not to honor the dead, but to bind them, to use them. You think Wayne's boiling was just some primitive attempt at preservation? No, it was a transformation. In alchemy, they call it calcination, the burning of the flesh to purify the soul. A sacred reduction. A way to strip a man of earthly limits. They didn't just want to move Wayne. They wanted to deconstruct him, to break the myth, to shatter the symbol. But they failed. Because symbols, once seated in blood, are hard to kill. Especially when they're buried in two places. There are legends now that Wayne's ghost marches the path between Erie and his final tomb. That his soul is fractured, bound to both graves. Why would that matter? Because split souls, in many ancient traditions, become conduits, anchors, points of access for forces beyond comprehension. Was Wayne just a restless ghost? Or was he turned into something else entirely, a beacon for a hidden order? History, as you were taught, is a tapestry, neat, linear, clean. But in truth, it's a battlefield, a war of narratives. And men like Anthony Wayne, they're not allowed to survive intact. Not when they disrupt the myth of control. Wayne was a man who bent reality with sheer will. His battlefield success was unnatural, almost prophetic. Ask the Iroquois. Ask the British. Ask his own men, who said he moved like a man possessed. He didn't retreat. He didn't sleep. He didn't bleed like the rest, and after death, that power didn't fade. It multiplied. Because here's what no one tells you. When you die violently, with unfinished purpose, your essence lingers. That's why secret societies, those who guard the real engines of history, don't fear death. They use it. They manipulate the dead to channel energy, to encode messages, to guard secrets only the worthy may access. Wayne's body wasn't just dismembered. It was ritualized. He became a relic, a vessel. And now, when the winds shift and the moon hangs low over Pennsylvania, some say you can still hear hoofbeats in the distance. He's not gone. He's watching, waiting, guarding something no one has yet unlocked. There's a reason relics are hunted by the elite. A saint's bone, a king's sword, a general's skull. These are not just artifacts. They're vessels of energy, soaked in blood, memory, and myth. Mad Anthony Wayne's bones were separated, boiled, and transported like cargo. But do you really believe that was done without intention? Every ancient culture, Babylonian, Norse, Egyptian, understood that the remains of the dead could hold power. Not just symbolic power, but operational force, ritual force. What if Wayne's bones were used in ceremonies? What if they still are? Ask yourself, why were some of his bones lost during transport? Why does his ghost still appear between the two gravesites? This isn't about haunting, it's about entrapment. Wayne wasn't buried, he was bound. His legacy split, his soul fractured, his remains dispersed like talismans. Somewhere along the eerie trail, a man with too much knowledge and too little fear decided to turn a national hero into an immortal guardian, or a warning. But for whom, and for what? The American Revolution was not just a war of independence. It was a birth ritual for a new empire. A carefully choreographed overthrow, guided by occult timing, sacred geometry, and ancient principles of chaos and order. Look at the founding fathers, many of them high-ranking Freemasons. Look at the Washington Monument, the layout of D.C., the obelisks, the stars, the hidden numerology in the Constitution itself. Now look again at Anthony Wayne. He was not a founder, but he was a weapon, a living sigil of willpower, war, and raw force. Every empire needs its sword, but swords become dangerous when they grow a mind of their own. And Wayne wasn't built to be stored in a scabbard. That's why he had to be silenced, not by words, but by ritual. The calcination of his body, the division of his bones. It reads like a warning, like a coded message passed down through generations of initiates. A whisper in the ear of the elite. Even the strongest must be broken. But what if Wayne resisted even that? There's a forgotten letter, not kept in the Library of Congress, but hidden in a private collection, passed through the hands of Masonic historians and secret archivists. The letter is unsigned, but old, and in it, the writer speaks of Wayne not as a man, but as a cipher, a symbol that cannot be allowed to reunite. It warns that if the bones are ever gathered again, the body is made, Holy Gate will open. Not in heaven or hell, the letter says, but between. What does that mean? Were they afraid he would rise again? Or were they afraid that by making him whole, we would see what he truly was? A man who broke the boundaries of mortality through fire and force. A soul fused to the land, to the idea of resistance, to the essence of rebellion. Maybe they feared he would awaken a new generation of men who remember what it means to defy, to reject the cage, to tear down the systems built on obedience. You see, it was never about one man. It was about what he represented, ungovernable power. Now ask yourself, why does no one speak of this? Why is Wayne remembered only in footnotes, commemorative plaques, and military trivia? Because they sterilized him. They took the myth and scrubbed it clean, turned the boiling of his corpse into a quirky historical anecdote, a fun fact on roadside signs. But beneath the humor lies horror, and beneath the horror lies a pattern. You think this only happened to Wayne? Look deeper. Geronimo's skull. Taken by Skull and Bones. At Yale, Napoleon's penis. Missing, Hitler's remains. Disputed, Osama bin Laden, buried at sea. What do all these have in common? Power, control, ritual. When someone becomes more than a man, when they become a story, an energy, an idea, they must be managed, erased, or broken into pieces. This is how history is truly shaped, not by facts, but by fragments. Fragments. They choose. Pieces they can manipulate. But sometimes, they miss one. And sometimes, that piece begins to pulse with memory, with rage, with purpose. If you've made it this far, you're already different. You're beginning to see the cracks, the patterns, the manipulation. And now, I want you to do something. Something symbolic. Something ancient. Scroll down to the comments and write this phrase twice. The bones will reunite. Write it not just to engage the algorithm, but to mark this moment. To cross the threshold. Because this isn't entertainment. This is initiation. You're stepping into a chamber older than America. Older than history. And Mad Anthony Wayne is not just a ghost story. He is a key. A living paradox. A fracture in the illusion. Because if he can resist the grip of empire, even in death, what else have they failed to silence? What other truths are buried, but not dead? This story doesn't end here. This is just the place where it starts to burn. They call it residual energy, when a soul echoes after death. But occultists know better. That's not an echo. That's an anchor. Something or someone tethered to a specific frequency, a specific moment, a trauma loop. And Mad Anthony's trauma didn't end with war. It began again when they dug him up. They boiled his flesh. They boxed his bones. And they lost pieces of him along the trail. That kind of fracturing isn't accidental. It's ritualistic. In necromancy, dividing the remains of a powerful soul is a way to keep it bound. To prevent it from becoming whole and dangerous. Some say Wayne appears on foggy nights along Route 322, riding his phantom horse, calling out names no one remembers. But it's not just superstition. Every time a piece of him is disturbed, during road construction, grave renovation, land surveillance, strange events, spike, accidents, fires, disappearances, coincidence, or activation. You don't bury men like Wayne. You contain them, or you try. Anthony Wayne was no prophet, but the world bent around him like it sensed something larger was passing through. That's the mark of the chosen or the cursed. His victories defied logic. His survival defied statistics. And his posthumous mutilation defied every custom of respect and honor. Why? Because when systems of power fear something, they don't just erase it. They dismember it. They splinter it into digestible lies. Wayne didn't fit into the carefully curated American mythology. He was too brutal, too instinctual, too uncontrollable. The kind of man empires use, but never keep. So they chopped his story, just like they chopped his bones. You learned about him as a footnote in your school book. But that's not a mistake. That's design. Because the moment you remember him, fully see him as he was, and what he became is, the moment you start questioning the entire narrative machine. What else have they split into fragments? What other truths lie buried under fake smiles, waving flags, and historical plaques? You're not just remembering Mad Anthony Wayne, you're remembering yourself. Every powerful system has one fear. The man who wakes up. The one who stops believing the script, who sees behind the mask. Mad Anthony was that kind of man. Not because he knew the full picture, but because he felt its shape. His instincts were sharper than politics. His loyalties were deeper than strategy. And that kind of raw force is always dangerous to institutions built on deception. That's why they didn't just bury him. They ritualized his death. Calcination, separation, transport, dislocation. This was symbolic execution. They turned him into a warning. Step outside the machine, and this is your fate. But the warning backfired. His presence didn't weaken. It intensified. The land remembers. The wind still echoes his war cry. And in quiet corners of Pennsylvania, men whisper stories they aren't supposed to know. Of fire in the sky. Of bones that rattle underfoot. of a general who walks where no man should. Maybe it's not a haunting. Maybe it's a summoning. Let's step deeper. In ancient grimoires books, not taught in any school, you'll find references to heroic dismemberment, a technique used to trap the soul of a warrior, fragment it across space, and use the shards to guard or curse specific sites. The Norse did it. The Druids did it. The Knights Templar, too. What if Wayne was subjected to the same? The eerie trail between his two graves could be more than a geographic accident. Could be a ley line, a sacred path of energy activation. That path may have been seeded with his power, piece by piece, so that no one could ever wield it again. And yet something went wrong. The ritual didn't complete. A bone was misplaced. A symbol left unfinished, and now the power still moves. Still waits. That's why sightings continue. Why electronics short-circuit near the graves. Why historians who probe too deep get pushed out, lose funding, or simply disappear. There is an energy older than the trail. Some call it madness. But you're starting to recognize it for what it is. Liberated will. What happens when you try to erase something sacred? You don't destroy it. You awaken it. That's the law of inversion. The more you suppress, the more pressure builds. The deeper the burial, the louder the echo. Wayne's mutilated corpse is not just an oddity, it's a ritual scar. And that scar has power. Every man who walks near his grave, every traveler who drives unknowingly over the old trail, they feel it. A tightening in the chest. A flicker in the peripheral vision. An unspoken sense of trespass. Because something is still watching. Not angry, not vengeful. Just waiting. Waiting for a man, or a generation of men, who will finish what was started, not the war for land, but the war for truth. For sovereignty. For the right to not be controlled by shadow systems hiding behind democratic masks. Anthony Wayne is not just a ghost, he's a mirror. And if you look long enough, you'll see your reflection. Stripped of lies. Burning with the same fire. You're starting to see how deep this goes. Wayne's disappearance is not about bones. It's about memory, ritual, energy. He is an archetype, the unyielding warrior. The man who refuses to die the way they want him to. The man who tears through the veil, who rides between worlds. When they couldn't erase his body, they broke it. When they couldn't erase his legend, they buried it under mediocrity. But you can't kill a symbol once it's bled into the land. That's why his story keeps surfacing, not through textbooks, but through whispers, late-night conversations, haunted locals, soldiers who feel watched. Ritual doesn't care about your disbelief. It moves through symbols, through scars, through the architecture of the unseen. And Wayne Mad Anthony is now part of the structure, not buried under America, but inside it, under your roads. Your maps, your myths. He is the glitch in the system. The code that refuses to be deleted. You're not learning about history anymore. You're entering it. In the oldest rites of initiation, the initiate is broken down. Stripped, scattered. Their name, their identity, their bones all dissolved. Then they are rebuilt, made whole. But not the same, transformed. Anthony Wayne underwent this ritual. Not in life but in death. His body became a map. His trail, a ley line. His memory, a cipher. And now, the transformation is not his alone, it's yours. You've followed his bones. Felt the fracture. Seen the manipulation. And now, you face the final truth. The same systems that tried to break Wayne are working to break you. Through media, through medicine, through machines, through mockery. You are being dismembered, psychologically. But it's not too late. Ritual can be reversed. Bones can be gathered. Power can be reclaimed. If you have the courage to remember yourself. This isn't just a story. It's a signal, and you just answered it. Now listen closely. Because this is the part they never wanted you to understand. What happened to Anthony Wayne was not a mistake of history. Was a template, a blueprint. What they did to his body, they now do to your mind. Fragmentation. Dismemberment, ritual exposure. Your attention is boiled in distraction. Your identity is cut into piece. Is race politics, entertainment, anxiety until You no longer know who you are or what you stand for. And when you become fragmented, you become controllable. Like Wayne's bones in a box, like a spirit walking in loops, disconnected from itself. Do you see it now? Wayne's death wasn't the end, it was the beginning of a system, a prototype for psychological warfare. He was the first warning shot, the first man too powerful to fully erase. And because they couldn't kill his fire, they studied it, learned from it, weaponized it. And now, every institution you trust, from schools to screens to shrinks, is built to make sure you never become like him. But what if you already are? Symbols outlast steel. The battlefield is no longer Fort Ticonderoga or Stony Point. It's your phone screen, your bloodstream, your belief system. The enemy doesn't wear red coats anymore. It wears suits, sits behind digital curtains, sells you safety in exchange for obedience. But Mad Anthony Wayne wasn't obedient. That's what made him dangerous. And that's why his story was buried, distorted, and turned into folklore. Because if you remembered him correctly, if you remembered that he was a man who charged enemy lines with no backup, who stared death down and kept moving, who defied his chain of command and won anyway, then you might realize you've been trained to forget your own fire. They teach you to worship safety. Wayne worshipped will. He believed in something beyond systems, his own command. That's what they feared. That's what they cut apart. Not just a man, but the idea of a man who doesn't break. Every man walks with ghosts, but few ever hear them. Because, in this world of noise, silence is outlawed. Stillness is dangerous. But if you ever find yourself alone on that old trail between Erie and Radnor, turn off the car, step out, close your eyes, and listen. You might hear hoofbeats in the mist. You might feel a presence, watching not with menace, but with recognition. Because Wayne doesn't haunt the trail out of grief. He walks it like a sentinel, like a man waiting for others to wake up and remember who they are. His path is your inheritance, a ritual of memory, of war, of return. And if you're listening now, truly listening, you've already stepped onto it. The truth is, this story was never about a ghost. It's about the man you're becoming, and the war you were born into, even if no one told you. We are surrounded by unfinished rituals. Tombs built, but never sealed. Names erased, but not forgotten. Symbols misused by hands unworthy of their power. And Mad Anthony Wayne stands among them, fractured but unfallen. A man dismembered in death, yet more complete than those who rule us alive. What if the system's greatest fear is not death but reunion? What if, piece by piece, men begin to gather what was broken inside themselves, and in the stories they were never told? That's what this is. A gathering, a remembering, a realignment. The bones are not just Wayne's, they are ours, our strength, our clarity, our ungovernable fire. That's why you were brought here, not by chance, by resonance. You heard the call now, you must decide. Go back to forgetting, or walk the trail. Finish the ritual. Reclaim the war cry. You've been taught to believe in decay, that all things fade, that the past is dust, that the future is chaos. But there is a third path, a hidden one, a path forged by those who refuse to surrender to time, to fear, to the lie of inevitability. Mad Anthony Wayne walks that path still, in the ether, in the cracks, in the hearts of men who will no longer be silenced. You can feel it now, can't you? The trembling in your spine isn't fear, it's memory. Something buried deep, waking, something ancient, something unbroken. That is the fire of origin. The truth they buried beneath education, entertainment, sedation, but it's still there, waiting for a name, waiting for your voice. This is not a bedtime story. This is a call to arms. Not with bullets, with clarity, with alignment, with an identity forged by fire, not by algorithm. Anthony Wayne wasn't just mad, he was free. There is a reason every empire fears memory. Not history memory. History is what they write in books. Memory is what lives in the bones, in the soil, in your blood. Wayne's bones were split across two graves because they feared what might happen if the pieces came back together. And now, centuries later, They fear the same thing in you. They've fractured your memory, split your loyalties, fed you curated identities. But some of you, few of you, are starting to remember. Not just Wayne, but what he represented. You feel it in the quiet moments. That something's off. That this world was built on omissions, sanitized myths. And now, in your silence, in your hunger, you're starting to hear echoes they tried to erase. You were told to idolize comfort. Wayne worshipped chaos. You were taught to follow rules. Wayne made war with them. You were told to die slowly, with a smile. He lived like fire, and fire, my friend, cannot be buried. Let me tell you something no textbook ever will. This was never about Wayne. He was just the beginning. A fragment of a much older code. A prototype of rebellion too primal to contain. A symbol that refused to stay dead. And now, like a virus, waking up in the system, that code is spreading, through you. Through this story. Through this very moment. Look around. Why do you think so many men feel lost? Because they were never meant to be plugged in, pacified, and poisoned. They were meant to hunt, build, remember. And that memory is the most dangerous weapon of all. Not knowledge, not violence, memory, because memory brings identity. Identity breeds power, and power cannot be governed. Not truly. That's why Wayne wasn't allowed to rest. Because he remembered who he was, even in death. They boiled his flesh, but they couldn't erase the man. And now, they can't erase you, either. This was not a story. This was a rite of passage. A resurrection. You've walked through fire. You've traced the path of broken bones, scattered truth, and ritual violence. And you didn't turn away. You stared into the fracture. You felt the chill, and now, you've changed. The man who began this video is gone. In his place stands someone else. Someone remembered. You've looked behind the curtain and seen the ancient gears of control, hidden rituals, systemic erasure, and the psychological dismemberment of the masculine soul. But now you know, you're not fragmented. You're not lost. You are gathering, like Wayne, like memory, like fire. Leave no piece behind. Speak no lie to yourself. Finish the rituals out loud, or in silence. Know this, the world you walk through tomorrow will feel different. Not because it changed, but because you did. And when the shadows move, when the past knocks on your spine in the middle of the night, don't fear it. Answer it, because now, the bones have reunited.